Okay, yeah, I see participants coming in right now. We'll give everybody about 30 seconds here to get logged in with us. Okay, we're still moving. Hello, everybody. Smile panelists, you're live.
Morning. Afternoon.
Hello.
Okay. Well, while people are still coming in, let's go ahead and get started here. So let me welcome everybody to the Direct Sourcing Forum Fall webinar. Last I looked, we had 285 registered attendees today, representing 15 countries, including Canada, Congo, France, Germany, Ghana, India, Lithuania, New Guinea, Poland, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, the Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We appreciate it. For those who are joining for the first time, we created the Direct Sourcing Forum back in 2021 to explore direct sourcing really as kind of a disruptor to traditional staffing. We felt that direct sourcing deserved its own stage and spotlight. So we created the forum to do just that. This is our 7th quarterly webinar. It's hard to believe we're up to 7 already. Interest in direct sourcing continues to grow very rapidly. In fact, many of you have probably seen a recent staffing industry analyst survey that suggested that 49% of their respondents are looking at rolling out direct sourcing within the next 2 years. So that was definitely encouraging to see. Today, we're very fortunate to have distinguished panelists from AMS, LiveHire, Optly, Raise, TalentNet, and Tundra. And today we plan to discuss direct sourcing, program operations, and continuous improvement. Before we get started, I do want to mention a couple things. About halfway through today's webinar, we're going to launch a poll. It's the first time we've tried to do that. And we would like to ask the attendees, there are just 3 questions. We hope to tally them on the screen during the webinar. Also, I did want to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded today, so don't write anything crazy that you wouldn't want to be seen publicly. And then finally, we will share a link to a recording of the webinar afterwards. So if you have to leave for some reason, you'll be able to see it in its entirety. Now let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Let's start with Julie.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I am Julie Schetzel. I am here representing AMS. So just a little bit of background on us. AMS is a workforce solutions firm. We deliver a number of different talent acquisition services, including direct sourcing curation, which is what we're really focused on today. Very well known for our RPO business, as well as tech upskilling and reskilling. We're a very large global firm operating in over 120 countries, and are very well recognized for our branding expertise as well as our sourcing expertise. So really excited to have the conversation today and be a part of this with all the other panelists.
Thanks, Julie. Karen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Gonzalez. I run the North American business for LiveHire. LiveHire is a pure play direct sourcing technology. We also do some total talent management as well. We've been in business since 2011, and we have about 200 clients in our portfolio globally currently. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks very much, Karen. Coop?
Yep. Hello, my name is David Cooper. I'm the president of Optly. We are a direct sourcing technology and AI platform. We're known quite a bit in the industry for our proprietary AI, as well as our talent community strategy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Coop. Edwin?
Hey, Edwin Jansen here. I'm the head of corporate development at Raise. I was the original architect of our managed direct sourcing offering a few years ago, and it's been a great success. Raise is a mid-sized staffing firm. We've got about 500 employees across North America, India, Ghana, and the Philippines. We've used direct sourcing to curate talent pools and hire thousands of workers across North America. So I'm going to try my best to share as many secrets as I can today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks very much, Edwin. Keith?
Hi, everybody. I'm Keith Wulffraat. I'm the CPO at TalentNet, and we are a direct sourcing platform. I am relatively new to the team. Prior to this, I was a buyer, like many of you, at Meta for several years, and before that at Caterpillar. I'm excited to be here and share my journey.
Thanks very much, Keith. And last but not least, Laura.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Bobie, here representing Tundra. I lead our curation services practice. Similar to what Julie mentioned, we are a technical staffing company specializing in curation. We've been providing the service since about 2015 and proud to report some of the highest fill rates in the industry. So thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks very much, Laura. And my name is Brian McGuire. I lead sales at TalentBelt. We're an advisory firm. We help customers with essentially program design, vendor selection, and program rollout. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Let's go ahead and get started with our first question. Our first question is, how will direct sourcing help us during an economic downturn? Who wants to take that?
I'll start us off,
Okay.
dive in. Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's been a lot of turmoil over the last couple of years, I think, to say the least. And it looks like we're definitely kind of expecting to see some type of economic downturn or recession in the future. And so typically what we see happen at companies when this starts to kind of unfold is that companies are really trying to achieve a couple of things. One, they want to be in the most agile position that they can be in. So that really trickles down to having an agile and a flexible workforce. They also want to be able to reduce risk and come in a lot of different forms. Again, a lot of that comes to cost. It comes to having fixed costs. It comes to being able to still try to, fill the jobs they need to fill and do the work that they need to do, but in a kind of different in kind way. And then also, as you would imagine, a big piece of this is cutting costs. And so when you think about what the contingent workforce can deliver, it really helps organizations achieve those things. And looking back a bit at history, if we look back to 2008, and hopefully it's, what we're expecting in the future is not quite as rough as what we all experienced in 2008. But if you look back at some data from what happened at that time period, we saw a huge spike in demand for contingent labor. Some data that I was looking at a couple of days ago and preparing for some things was that we saw that about 10% of the workforce was contingent in 2008 for most companies. Leading into 2009, that jumped to 17%, and by the end of 2009 was at 20%. So you're looking at a double in demand in terms of what you would expect to see for contingent labor. So when you think about the role of direct sourcing, what direct sourcing will help you do is it'll help you actually overcome that increase in demand. So you already have your staffing suppliers in place. This is going to supplement what you already have to make sure that you can fill all of those roles that still need to be filled, because we really don't expect to see a decline in the jobs. It's really just who's filling those jobs it will look and feel different because they'll be filled by contingent workers versus full-time workers. So there's a big demand piece that direct sourcing is going to help you accomplish. The other big piece of this is that cost cutting initiative or cost savings. So direct sourcing is when we talk to folks, we're out in the market all the time talking to folks. One of the main drivers for implementing direct sourcing is cost savings. So our clients that we work with typically see anywhere from a 10 to 30% savings for that worker compared to what they would pay through a staffing firm. So it's really helping you support those initiatives of the overall organization. And honestly, this is the time when you're probably going to get some of those senior leaders who are going to really focus on this because they're going to feel that pressure too. So I think a couple of things, I feel like I could dive into a ton of the benefits of direct sourcing, but those are some of the things that I really start to see as the market shifts. It's really kind of creating that perfect environment for direct sourcing to really take hold and deliver a lot of value.
Nice. That's a great answer. So you touched on fulfillment and potentially cost savings, and something that I think people overlook, just to comment, is that when you build a talent pool, it's actually an asset that can be used again and again and again. So from an accounting standpoint, It's not a variable cost like going out and filling roles with traditional staffing. You've got really a fixed asset that you can use and build over time. So, I think just something I wanted to call out there, but, great job with the answer. Yeah.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think also we start to see too, there could even be an avenue of kind of a temp to perm place as well, as you're still trying to build up that talent pool too. So I think lots of different avenues this can take. And lots
So
of value.
total talent. Yeah, no, great call out. Good. Thank you. So we've got another question here. Here's an interesting one. We need to be diplomatic, I think. Should we expect to replace our staffing suppliers with direct sourcing? And if so, when do you anticipate that this will happen? Who wants to take that one?
I'll take that one, Brian.
All right. Thanks.
So, yeah, so I've lived this one as a buyer. My strategy when I went out to market originally looking for a direct sourcing solution was to complement my existing staffing supply base. We had so much demand that we were looking for another channel to find qualified talent, but also we wanted the ability to sort of curate that experience for sort of the war for talent. So we wanted to make sure that experience was amazing for the talent that was coming in the door. Now, that's not to say that you would stop doing your typical optimization. So with programs that I've run in the past, every 12 to 18 months, I would go through sort of an optimization process of my existing supply base, staffing supply base. I looked at that journey, was going to continue for us. And as you optimize, then your direct sourcing channel will pick up market share, as will your high performing successful suppliers in your program. So just from my experience, I never anticipated not having staffing suppliers, but I absolutely wanted to have a thriving direct sourcing program in place. And I think I was on a webinar about 2 years ago talking about this very topic as a buyer, and we were asked where we saw the future and what we thought, the program would grow to in time. And some people thought it might grow larger, like to 100%. And they're on the more aggressive side, I think, of the buyer community. My guess was I would get to be about 50% of our program, and that was from my prior life. So I think, I think there'll always be a need for your staffing suppliers. There's always going to be some, niche roles or niche groups that'll need staffing suppliers, or even large scale, areas. But I think, having this program, in your portfolio will be absolutely critical. And then as you think about, as Julie was saying, cost savings, I think going into a recession, it's going to become even more important.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great insight from the buy side. And just kind of a quick follow-up question. So if you compare what you saw at CAT versus Meta, would you say you were at roughly the same percentage of fills from direct sourcing in both organizations, or was there, some delta there?
Well, CAT didn't have direct sourcing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, only at Meta.
Okay.
And then that was sort of a steep growth curve because that program only went in place about 18 months ago.
Okay. And one other quick follow-up question. Were you seeing your staffing suppliers dabbling in direct sourcing, or were they all pretty much taking a traditional staffing approach?
Well, they weren't. The staffing. Okay, so you're just asking if any of our staffing suppliers also played in the space?
Yes.
When we went to market, we specifically were looking for curators to be a part of the program with a technology platform underpinning it. So we weren't looking to convert any staffing suppliers into curators. I do know that there are staffing suppliers that play in both spaces, really forward-looking ones in particular.
Got it. So they may have been pooling talent in the program anyway, whether known or not known. They may be doing that as part of their practice.
Yeah. Well, and
Okay.
they should. With Caterpillar in the light industrial space, they need to have a ready bench. So they should be doing that, but that wasn't our asset. That was their asset.
Okay, no, great answer. Appreciate it. Let's see, next question here. This is a question we get pretty often. We've maybe answered it before, but let's maybe go a little bit deeper. And what types of jobs work best with direct sourcing, but also what doesn't work? And just, I'd like one of you guys to take that, but let's kind of rotate a little bit other than Keith and Julie. So who wants to take this question? What types of jobs work best with direct sourcing? Karen, you may be on mute. I think Karen wants to take this.
Sorry about that. Yes, I will go ahead and take that question. Sorry about that. So direct sourcing can really work for most roles, and it's a really versatile solution that can solve a lot of sourcing and engagement challenges. I would say where we've seen clients see kind of the immediate value is with some of the more repeatable and volume type roles. I would say the sweet spot is probably large volumes of repeatable roles that have highly available talent, kind of that entry level to mid-career type of position. That said, we have clients that we've built talent pools for every single role within their organization. It's about prioritizing how we build those talent pools. And I would say there are roles that it doesn't work as well for. That would include, I would say, kind of day labor type roles, just-in-time light industrial type roles, roles that are really high in demand with low availability of talent are tougher. It doesn't mean that you can't use direct sourcing for those roles, but it's just about prioritizing those roles in terms of what is most critical, and understanding that if there's only 10 people available for a role in Montana, direct sourcing doesn't solve for that. It can get to those 10 people faster, but there's still only 10 people available for that role. So it certainly can work for every role. It's more about moving from a reactive approach to a proactive approach, and having the time to build those talent pools for those roles, and having data or a forecast from the client to help us understand when they might need those roles. So I would say challenges that it doesn't solve for would include attrition due to pay below market. So what do I mean by that? If your organization pays below market, direct sourcing can't solve for that. We can certainly find candidates, we can get candidates, but you may still have high attrition because they're going to leave that job to go to another job. If there's poor working conditions, if there's long screening and assessment or an interview process, that can be problematic as well. Again, we can find the candidates. It's just whether they will stay around long enough to either take the role or whether they will complete their assignment if they can get better pay elsewhere.
So basically, direct sourcing is not a magic bullet for fixing low pay or bad working conditions. Keith, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just caveat that. So I agree 100%. I would just caveat it with, I'm thinking back to my Caterpillar days, and we had production facilities in lots of small markets, and so you're competing with whoever, the gun manufacturer down the street, or maybe one or two other companies for the same talent. It's possible, I've been just noodling this lately anyway, it's possible that direct sourcing, can help you kind of squeeze into that bill rate that you're trying to, leverage anyway. Does that make sense? So, because you're kind of, it's a cheaper solution. You're able to, offer the worker more pay at a lower bill rate than you would through traditional means, if that makes sense.
No, that's a great call out. So the difference or the delta between the delivery cost of direct sourcing versus traditional staffing can be passed to the worker as a pay increase. So there is a clear advantage there. No, that's very interesting. And Karen, quick follow-up question for you too, since you answered the first part of the question. If you kind of look into your crystal ball in the future, do you see those kind of niche roles? You said finding 10 workers in Montana. So do you see sort of a bifurcation between staffing and direct sourcing in the future, where maybe traditional staffing is focusing more niche, by geography or by skill set, and direct sourcing is going after more bulk hiring? Is that too much of a generalization, or is that kind of what you were saying?
No, and I think this kind of goes back to what Keith was saying too. I think, direct sourcing most likely is not going to replace your supply base, right? You're still going to have suppliers that maybe have that focus on a niche type role or a specific geography. And so it's really balancing your suppliers and where their focus is. You may have fewer suppliers, but you still may need those suppliers that have those areas of specialty.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, great. Thank you for that. Let's move to our next question. We promised to talk about operations today, so let's get operational. Let's see. What should our QBR agenda look like for direct sourcing? And should we combine that with an MSP QBR, or should it be a standalone? So who wants to take that? Let's hear from somebody new.
I'd like to take that. Anyone who knows me knows that I love data. So I will jump in on that one. And I think one point I'll make is I'm glad that the question is being asked. I know that sometimes when we first engage with clients, it's maybe unclear on how you should measure your direct source program and whether you should have a QBR at all. So first I'll say, yes, please have a QBR for direct source. And I think to answer the second part of the question on whether it should be combined with your MSP QBR, I would say it should be separate. I do think it's important to distinguish that those are different services. I do always recommend that your MSP is an active participant in that direct source QBR. And I'll say that I think your technology partner should also be at the table. And I'm not just saying that because the tech partners are on today. I think they need to be active in that review. And you want to set the stage so that it can be a productive, QBR series. So ensure that the KPIs are aligning with what the client's looking for. I think we talked about cost savings, but there are a lot of other reasons that clients will enter into a direct source program. Could be access to talent, time to fill. You want to make sure that you're answering those questions or calls from the client. I do think as well, having some shared metrics or shared KPIs with your MSP is really important. I mean, you want a client that's encouraging collaboration, and I think doing it in a meaningful way in your QBR can really help with that. The other piece around having your MSP there is you want to help to contextualize that data. So what is going on with the rest of the program? What is your baseline so that they can continue to push direct source, hopefully to be the most competitive stream of talent in that program. And for agenda, I mean, there is a long list. Like I said, I love data. There are lots of things that I want to be looking at in that QBR. I think, kind of first year, second year, you want to look at the growth of your pool. You want to understand how your brand use is working. And you want to understand how that pool is engaged. So something that we like to look at is how active that pool is through number of applications or kind of percentage of pool that have an active application. And you want to make sure that that number is increasing because that is demonstrating that there's value being provided back to that candidate. The other, of course, is fulfillment. And I think you need to ensure that with a client, you've set expectations on what that maturity kind of, flow or maturity model will look like over the first couple of years for fulfillment. So something you want to pay close attention to. And of course, savings and, be sure that your MSP, your client, and you are all aligning on how that should be calculated.
Oh, great detail. Do you have, I assume there are specific metrics that are probably driven by the standard report library that's available with the tool. So, and maybe that's more of a technology question, but I assume also from a curation standpoint, I did want to ask this, how do you approach this in a tool agnostic way? So I assume you're looking at cost, quality, user experience, time to fill, the typical metrics. And, and maybe I'm talking too much here, but do you find that it's almost competitive with the MSP? Is it complementary? Do you feel like you're being compared?
I think it should be complementary. I mean, you hit on some of the big items there. To be agnostic, we ensure that we're pulling data that the MSP provides us, as well as the technology and building, custom solutions for our clients. And I strongly believe that the MSP is looking to do the same thing we are, which is to fill roles as effectively, as quickly, and as cost efficiently as we possibly can. So we collaborate really well with our partners today, but I think that direction needs to come clearly from the client, so that collaboration starts from day one.
No, great
Can I
follow-up.
add on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Coop, you want to go?
No, I'll pivot to you, Keith, and jump in afterwards. Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I would say not so much what the agenda looks like is important, but that you have a separate QBR. Anyone who's spent any time in an MSP QBR knows that you always run out of time. There's always more to talk about than you have time to talk about. And you don't want this to be sort of the last thing on an agenda in an MSP QBR, because you'll never get to it and it'll never get the love and attention it needs to thrive. A successful program is an extension of the company. They're representing, your curators representing you in the marketplace. And you want to make sure they're getting the TLC they need to be successful. You want to look at, technology metrics and the metrics of the performance of the curator as well. But I think it's important in the early days in particular that that you're getting traction, that you're knocking down barriers as you do in good governance. And you're just giving them the time and attention they need for it to be successful, just like any sort of program that you're setting up in corporate America.
No, I think that echoes what we're trying to do with the forum itself, is carve out a space for direct sourcing that is unique to direct sourcing. So thank you for that follow-up. I appreciate it. We have another question here looks like it came up as a result of this question, although it's asking more from a supplier perspective. Should we treat our curation partner like a staffing supplier, or should we treat them like something different? Oh, it looks like Edwin may want to take this one. I see him stepping up.
That's my hot button right there.
Yeah.
My personal experience is that treating your curation partner like a staffing supplier, it just might be the #1 reason why a direct sourcing program fails to live up to its potential. Kind of like what Keith was just indicating, we really need some TLC. We need to work together. Although a curation partner like Raise, we're also a staffing supplier. Please don't think of direct sourcing curation as a service that you receive, because then you won't get great results. Like, this is really a strategic partnership with us, where we're utilizing your employer brand and we're curating talent pools for you so that you can get better hires faster and at a lower rate. We've pre-negotiated and set a lower markup so that every hire we make is a net cost savings to you. We call our service managed direct sourcing because it operates exactly as if you had your own in-house team operating the program. So this is, a very direct and tight working relationship. We're trying to achieve specific goals, and it won't be as successful as it could unless we're working, really closely together, and that you want to give the direct sourcing curation team every advantage possible within the normal operations of your program. And that's really where we see a lot of programs struggle, since everyone or most people are used to a vendor neutral approach. But the other vendors, they're not committed to a lower markup, and they're not building your database, a database asset for you. So, you don't really need to change anything about how your program operates, but instead of thinking of us as your supplier or vendor, please think of us as your partner. And everyone uses that partnership term, but in this case, I think it's right, because in order for the program to succeed, we each have a key important roles to play. So you, the client, you will want to give your curation team every advantage that you can. And that includes getting really good job descriptions and access to hiring managers, providing a priority window where you're allowing your curation team to check your talent pools before you send the job to the talent base or the supply base. And then promoting jobs on your company careers page into your ATS database so that we can pull in as many great candidates as possible into your talent pools. And then us as the curation partner, we need to take those advantages that you're providing and we need to deliver because each hire is a cost saving. So, the only way that this works for everyone is if we deliver significant volume. And so we all want to get to as large a percentage of the hires made through direct sourcing as possible, as quickly as we can. So to do this, your creation partner, we've got to pull out all the stops, which starts with supplying specialized curators who are experienced in direct sourcing. And you notice we're all using the word curators. It's kind of a funny word, but we're not using the word recruiter, because this role is a bit different. It's a hybrid. We're representing your brand in the market. We need to deliver an amazing candidate experience. So it's quite similar to being one of your corporate recruiters, but we're also acting as a staffing supplier. So it's similar to being, it's more fast paced, it's more transactional. And our curators need to know how to keep these talent pools engaged and moving quickly. So yeah, we've all got really important roles to play so we can maximize our success together. And it might sound like a lot of work, but it's really not that much work for you. And that's why we call it managed direct sourcing. It's a managed service. We've got to do 90% of the work, but we've got to do it in very, close cahoots together with you. And so, yeah, that's kind of my big speech and why this is my hot button. You can tell I care about it.
Well, you touched on an interesting point too, and one that I think comes up from time to time, but we never really put it out on the table. Direct sourcing is really very close to RPO. I think I'm thinking of my friend Chuck Young, who may be out there in the audience right now, who would say this is basically contingent RPO. So having maybe the attention of talent acquisition as well as procurement is pretty critical here, especially if you're sort of an ambassador for a brand. So I think there's a lot of good points made. Appreciate it.
Can I add on again? Oh,
Go ahead, Keith.
No. What I was going to say is, with good governance, you can monitor the performance of your technology provider and of your, just like an RPO, and of your service provider, and you can flip them if you need to. The asset is what they're creating and that experience, and you retain that, if they come and go. But you need that governance. So if you've got a direct sourcing platform or program in place today, and it's not performing, you probably need to have some governance in place, and or think about changing.
Yep.
Just a really quick comment on kind of a traditional staffing supplier versus a curation partner. So Edwin, you touched on this, but the talent does not belong to the curation partner. Again, we're creating the asset for your organization. If you think about, a question I get is, why can't I just let my current suppliers use my brand? Well, if they go advertise and use your brand, let's say they have to fill 5 roles and they get 30 applicants. They fill 5 roles. What happens to those other 25 applicants? They've used your brand to source that talent. They now have to recoup the investment that they've made in recruiting that talent. So they're going to try to place those other 20 people somewhere. It could be at a competitor. It could be anywhere. There's no control over where those candidates get placed. With direct sourcing, it goes back into your talent pool that's being curated by the curation partner, so that when the next role comes through, that talent has been engaged with and communicated with, and they're not going to a competitor after using your brand to source this talent. So that's a key differentiator.
Thanks, Karen. So let's move on to a new question. I see poor Coop hasn't had a question yet today, so I'm going to direct this next question to him. How should we approach a complex rollout, and which worker types are typically the most addressable when we're rolling out?
Yep. No, thank you for the question. Love the dialogue, right, that we're having on the panel on this. I love Edwin's passion on the last question, right? Because while we're the technology piece and not the curation piece, so it does take both pieces to deliver a direct sourcing solution to a customer. And I think it's a fool's errand to think, let's just set our direct sourcing partner, whether it be tech and or curation, up as a staffing company and expect an entirely different outcome, right? So I think when you look at how do you roll out direct sourcing, right, it is different than traditional staffing, and you have to do some things different than you do in traditional staffing. Therefore, you're getting the value drivers that are delivered through direct sourcing. If it's cost savings, if it's access to talent, those are coming by having a strategic sourcing initiative combining DS tech and curation services. So when you start to look at, how do you roll that out first, I think, for us, it's looking at the value drivers of what you're trying to accomplish. Are you focused on getting broader access to talent, right? Is that your leading initiative, which oddly enough seems to be number one that we see in dialogue with customers, prospects, and partners. But when you're identifying, okay, access to talent is going to be our focus, and you start to think of how would we roll this out? Well, from there, you have to, kind of identify what is your talent inventory, right? So if you're going to build out a private talent community, what's the inventory of talent you have known to you, right? What's the inventory of talent within your ATS? What is the inventory of talent that your brand attracts? And identifying, we would look at that as part of rolling this out would be what type of talent can we attract, whether it be through our own brand or whether it be through our direct sourcing tech partner. Conversely, if one of your leading initiatives is cost savings, right? As Karen and Keith were talking about in the earlier part of the conversation, right? It's identifying those cost savings levers, right? Where do you want to save money in your direct sourcing strategy? The layup is in the markup, right? You're able to, you have a lower cost to serve, therefore you can reduce your markup and achieve cost savings, to the point you have a pay rate differential, you can maybe apply those savings to the pay rate differential to attract talent. That's definitely a layup. But another way to also look at it is from a remote worker perspective, right? If I'm able to attract talent in a lower cost area than I had been traditionally in an on-premise area, direct sourcing blows that wide open. Because you're looking at talent on an aggregate basis versus, kind of the strength of one particular branch in one particular city. So I'd say, looking at, is it access to talent? Is it cost savings? Another way to look at it that we're also seeing, is it initiative based? We have a lot of clients that have come to us recently, like, we want to have a veteran hiring based initiative. How would we do that through direct sourcing? And again, it's taking inventory of the type of skills that your client wants to attract veterans to, and then aligning that with their skills. So, kind of the first answer I would say in approaching a rollout is identify what you're trying to accomplish from a value driver perspective and the ability to achieve that. When you look beyond that, kind of step two, do you go phased or do you go big bang? Right. And I don't think direct sourcing initially goes enterprise wide, global, big bang, right? It's more of a phased type of rollout because you're looking at, who are the internal stakeholders, who are internal advocates, again, that drive back to those value drivers that are going to give us the advocacy to roll out. How do we choose a scope that aligns to those goals? And is that scope realistic? How do we get early wins that come from that deployment? How do we get the metrics, probably back to some of Laura's piece of the QBR, to track that success and report on it? And then how do you learn, rinse and repeat, if you will, from a land and expand perspective? So I'd give that as a second bullet point of how do you roll this out? And then third, the worker type, kind of going back to some of the other conversation as well. The type of workers that you want to attract, again, could tie back to what you're trying to achieve. Right? When you're doing direct sourcing, you are building proactive talent communities to procure talent from, right? And I always think of kind of Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. That's what we're all doing and building out proactive talent communities, but it's a supply and demand balance, right? And if you have too much talent versus enough demand, right, you're going to have fallout and vice versa if you have too much demand and not enough talent. So it's balancing that supply and demand. And then also looking at, to some of the other panelists' points, what are the recurring skill sets where this would work? Where can we bring workers that are, common to find? And then pivoting to the staffing suppliers, allow them to be boutique, allow them to find your purple squirrels, pay them a markup that they deserve for hiring you the very tougher to find skills, the purple squirrels, et cetera. But meet with your direct sourcing tech and curation partner, do demand planning. And that, to me, is how you go more from a rollout perspective.
No, good answer, Coop. Appreciate the detail.
Mhm.
Let's take a look. We've got a question. It looks like about rec distribution here. How can we automatically distribute our requisitions to the most effective talent source, and how do we know what that source is? Who wants to take that?
Oh, the word automatic is another hot button for me. Well, first of all, I would say automatically, you should always provide all of your contingent jobs to your direct sourcing program, so at least they can be advertised and matched with potential candidates in your database and your talent pools. Like, since you'll be getting cost savings with every single hire, and you never know who may see the job or is already in the database, it doesn't really make sense to limit the success of the program. So, really think of every job that you have as some bait that we're using to lure candidates into the talent pools. So yeah, from a marketing point of view, you want to cast a wide net. Now, that being said, like other people have mentioned here, not every job is the best fit for your direct sourcing strategy, especially not at the beginning. Often it's the high volume or repeatable roles that we will start building talent pools for. And then those one-offs or highly specialized or hard to fill roles, they're still done by your more specialized suppliers who will really continue to be valued and play an important role in your program. So when we begin a direct sourcing program, we will look back at the past year of jobs that you've posted and filled. And from there, we work with you to try to create a forecast as best as we can of the numbers that you would likely hire into those positions in the next year. And then those are the jobs that we begin to build these talent pools for, so that when a job is posted, we already have candidates that are ready to go. And that's how the speed really starts to come into play. In our experience and in some data, I know, Karen, you've shared this data before, once you've got 10 pre-identified candidates for every opening, then you're almost guaranteed to fill it from that talent pool. So when that talent pool is full, then it makes sense for you to provide a priority window for that job to the curation team. So that means you're going to give them a head start to check for available candidates before you're sending it to your supply base. And then, like I was saying earlier, you shouldn't treat your direct sourcing program like your other suppliers. So you're rather thinking of it as the advertising of all your positions, the first place to look, and then the rest of your suppliers are utilized based upon how effective they are in that type of position. So yeah, while your program won't operate any differently for your suppliers, it's very much a different mentality. And we've heard the pushback on the idea of being tier 0 for direct sourcing. So instead, maybe position it as those stages that you want to do. And it's just a more effective and efficient process down the line than sending every job to all of your suppliers. And then what you're going to find is that once people understand internally all the advantages of direct sourcing, then you're going to also want to provide some other special treatment as it relates to forecasting and interviewing and access to hiring managers, so that you can maximize the success that you're having with the program.
And presumably this is analytics driven too. So you mentioned you're looking at what percentage of volume you need in a talent pool to make sure that you're going to fill a requisition 100% of the time. So I assume that works in the converse too. So if you're looking at analytics and you see like, hey, but we don't have anybody, do you ever see pushback from other suppliers saying like, well, why are they getting recs? They're getting tier 0, or at least they're getting them the same time as everybody else, but there's nobody in the talent pool for that. Why are we competing? I mean, I don't know, just kind of a question if there is that sort of mindset among suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, it is a change in mentality. And I mean, I think overall, if you have these generalist suppliers who are working on all different types of jobs and are not specializing, like they're going to decrease in the value that they're providing, because that's where direct sourcing is really going to step in. But as other people were saying, you got a value-added supplier that's really good at getting certain types of talent. They're actually going to increase in value, I would say, and they're going to earn those bigger markups that they have. So that's the way I would look at it. And from a metrics point of view, Laura mentioned a whole bunch of great metrics that we use to measure. One of the things that we pay close attention to is what's our submission to hire, submission to placement ratio. So gives you a good sense of the quality of the talent pools that we're building for your organization.
Okay.
Hey, I want to add in on this one.
Sorry,
Go
Chief.
ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one other thing too, as you're thinking about kind of where to send these recs to make sure that everybody has a great experience. I think, as a curation provider, we never want for our end client to feel like we've sat on a rec that we knew we couldn't fill and sent it off to the supply base. We don't want to do that. It's not a good experience for anybody. So one of the things that's worked really well for us is essentially, especially in the early days as we're getting things up and running, essentially have someone who's kind of like a concierge team that's saying, we know that we can fill this role, we're going to keep it, or we actually know right off the bat that it's probably good for you to go ahead and send this out because we don't think that the talent pool is dense enough. So it's really delivering that great experience overall and not holding anything up.
No, great.
It's a really, really important, point is that we want to be in lockstep about the quality of the talent pools and how likely we are to fill it. We don't want to hold anything back. And I would recommend that you don't say it's a 48-hour or 72-hour, that you're more agile than that, in terms of trying to maximize the effectiveness of everyone.
And I would just say too, like, I know with the live hire technology, and this is probably similar across the board with technologies, is that there's algorithms built into the technology that will indicate to that curation partner how full that particular talent pool is. And we know from our research that if it's below 40% depth, then the likelihood of us filling that role is less than if it's more than 40%. So if it's more than 40%, there's a good chance that we can fill it. But it's allowing that curation team to make decisions quickly based on the depth of that talent pool.
Good. And just Karen, following up on that comment, how should somebody, so what happens when the talent pool is picking up speed and you sort of reach this maybe like an uncomfortable QBR? How should somebody basically sunset a legacy supplier in a program? How do you know when to do it? How do you know when it's time? And I guess it's supplier rationalization, but I'll let you comment on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. There will definitely be opportunities to optimize your supply base over time. So with direct sourcing, day one, it's not like when you implement an MSP or a VMS where everything goes through direct sourcing day one, I should say it might go through direct sourcing, but not every role will be filled through direct sourcing. So you will see that scaling over time. And over time, you will have a chance to evaluate your current supply base to understand what that mix needs to look like. So no different than when you implement an MSP, there's usually a period of time, whether it be 6 months or 9 months, that you kind of make that determination whether you need the same number of suppliers or not. Most likely you won't, just given the efficiencies that you'll gain through direct sourcing. So you'll continue to measure the performance of your suppliers as you always have. You'll look at SLAs and KPIs and overall performance to determine what value they're bringing to the table. And then along the way, you'll make those decisions along with your MSP and direct sourcing partners to determine what that mix should look like. I believe that you should always be transparent. So I think, be transparent with your current supply base about your strategy, work with your MSP and your direct sourcing partners to develop a communication strategy around the changes that you're going to make. And I think this has been said by Edwin and Keith, but the idea is that you always want to look in your talent pool first. It often will go to another supplier, especially for some of those niche roles or maybe very specific geographies. But in order to maximize your value through direct sourcing, you want to look in your own talent pool first and then determine if you have that person or not. And then if not, pass it on to the rest of the supply base.
What's a typical lead time you would give to a direct sourcing program? When you say you pass the rec over, I know there's a lot of conjecture about it. Is it 24 hours, 48, 72? What's recommended best practice?
I mean, I typically see between 24 and 72. What we don't want is for that curation team to just sit on the rec, or for the rest of the suppliers to feel like, okay, well, this is a hard to fill role. Now we're getting just basically the garbage roles or hard to fill roles. So I think as soon as I feel like that curation team can quickly determine whether they think they're going to have the right person or not. But I don't think it should ever go past 72. And I think we often see 24 to 48, but I'll let the rest of the curation partners comment on that as well.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Keith.
Okay. I think it's very fair to give the curation partners visibility to the rec maybe before it's approved by finance or something like that, or as you build confidence in your curation, that you give them 24 hours or something like that. But what I wanted to say was, going back to, I think, one of the earlier points was, I'm a big proponent of opening up all the recs so that you build your asset. You start building your talent pool. And I think your strong curation partners, because they've been successful and they know this space, they're going to invest in you. And so you need to invest in them as well by giving them time and, governance and participation. But when they invest in you, that means they're out there actively, searching for roles and searching for skills and getting people into your talent pool to start building that asset for you. I think going with picking a few skill sets, I think that's a long road to success. Although I think it is a path to success, but I think it's a long road to success, and you're just going to build your asset and get to critical mass faster if you open up all of the recs.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you'll, even if you can't fill, or you get a role that you hadn't forecasted for, you still want to start building a talent pool just in case that role
that's right,
repeat at some point. So that's why I said, I don't think you necessarily have to say there's certain roles that aren't good for direct sourcing, other than maybe the kind of just-in-time light industrial or day labor. But there are some that are more niche that maybe, there's just not going to be a lot of volume, and there's still maybe a need for other suppliers.
Brian, maybe just to hop in as well, going back to BMS and MSP days, it always was an interesting metric when people say, what's your time to fill, right? But yet so much of time to fill is required upon the client actually taking action, right? Reviewing candidates, doing interviews, and making offers. Kind of what we're seeing as well as it translates to how much time do you give your curation and direct sourcing partner or tech partner to fill a rec. Again, that relies on how quickly a manager is going to actually look at the candidates that are coming through our pipeline. So if you say we'll give you 24 hours and it's taken the manager 4 days, it's more of a moot point. The time it is, I think what I would say is it's really your confidence that your direct sourcing technology and curation partner are going to be able to fill recs in the categories that you're sending their recs to, more than it is, give us time. Because again, if the client side isn't taking the time to do what needs to be done, that the time's a moot point. It's really the confidence that the client has you can fill these types of opportunities.
Okay. No, thanks.
We had hey, one more. I know you're going to start giving me the
no, it's right. Yeah.
But no,
for the audience, this means you're over time, right?
Yeah. But we actually found when we rolled out Meta that we filled a bunch of super long lead time skill sets. So some of the purple squirrels, and I think the reason for that was the leveraging of our brand. So a lot of unanticipated things happened when we rolled out. Most of them were really great.
Good. No, great dialogue, you guys. So thanks for that. Appreciate that. We have here a question. Let's see. We always get questions about candidate experience, so we must not be doing a really good job answering them in past webinars. So let's try this again. How does direct sourcing provide a better experience for the candidate, and how do you measure this in a practical way?
I'll jump in since I was quiet during the last discussion there, if that's okay. And I think Keith hit on a point that I think is important when we think about candidate experience, which is your brand. So I'll maybe touch on that conversation quickly. I think you need to understand as a client how your brand works in this kind of model, right? What candidates are you attracting kind of organically through this program, as opposed to limiting it based on, volume, frequency of skill set. I think you need to let your brand do the work for you wherever possible. And kind of back to the question on candidate experience, obviously that's a key focus when it comes to direct source. And I'll refer back, if you build it, they will come. You want to make sure that when a candidate is entering into the technology, that they are as much as possible finding what they're looking for. So I'm also of the mindset that you want to go with as many skill sets as possible so that your candidates that arrive there that you want to eventually engage, stay engaged in the process. Again, I think niche skills that's exactly how those will operate, right? I think you're seeing candidates with very niche or in-demand skill sets that want to drive their own search for a contract opportunity. So I think that is a huge advantage to a candidate. And we're also comparing their experience to one that is quite diluted today through traditional agencies. So by, kind of collecting and aggregating all of your roles under your single brand, you're making sure that that is far less diluted. A candidate can self-select to be considered for a role, and they can also ensure that they are engaging with brands that they see value in. You're also hopefully working with a curator that has a dedicated curation team. I know a few people have mentioned this. I think it's important, right? You want that curator to be an extension of your brand, of your EVP. You want to make sure that the message of what value you're bringing to the candidate is very clear. And that's really difficult to do when you have potentially hundreds of suppliers, depending on how large your program is. The other, and I'll highlight our tech partners here, is automated feedback. So one of the biggest concerns of applicants is the black hole. If they apply to a role and they never hear back, the chances of them reapplying for a second time is very, very low. So of course, hopefully you have thousands of people in the pool. You are trying to engage with them one-on-one, but the technology ensures that that feedback is happening in a timely manner when they're not considered for a role, when a role closes, whatever that might be. So I think that is a huge advantage to candidates. And how you measure it, this one's harder, right? I think it's a lot about, the candidate experience is a lot how people feel. Hopefully they feel very good about your brand. So getting to engage with it should provide value to them. But things that you can look at are returning applicants. So those that have gone through the process to any extent, are they returning and applying again? I think that's a very good indicator of their experience. I mentioned this earlier, but your percentage of pool with active applicants, who is actually engaging with the technology after they register. And I think, Edwin, you might have just mentioned this, but kind of your effectiveness of using the pool. So what is your submission to interview to hire traction that you have? Because I think, again, that is exactly what a candidate is there for. Hopefully they get the role, but most importantly, they feel engaged through the process.
It's a great answer, great detail again. Appreciate that. So a couple things, we're going to try something new here. We're going to actually try to launch a poll. And then I also have a question that I think I want to direct this one to Keith. We're going to try the poll first, and hopefully that won't be too distracting. I'm going to give this a try. And this is a buyer's poll. So for the folks in the audience, there are 3 questions here. If you wouldn't mind, hopefully this won't be too big of a distraction, and we'll publish the results in a minute. And so let me just make sure that's launched. Yes, it is. Good. So like I said, the next question, Keith, I want to direct this to you because of your background. This question asks, how does rolling out direct sourcing compare to rolling out an MSP program? Now, I'm asking you because I'm assuming you've done both, or you've been relatively close to doing both. So what's the same, what's different?
Yeah, so I rolled out a first generation program, MSP and VMS at Caterpillar. Prior to that, I rolled out a first generation one at Honeywell, MSP and VMS. And then I rolled out a second generation program, MSP and VMS and direct sourcing and DOR and AOR at Meta. So I've done a lot of this, and I'd say the main difference between the two is way less gray hair on a direct sourcing rollout. It's just night and day different with an MSP and VMS. It's a huge lift from a change management perspective, particularly on a first gen program, but it's a huge lift from a contracting, from an integrations perspective. I think at CAT, we had 13 different integrations with our VMS. So just so much more engagement from all the technology providers, all that kind of stuff. Night and day, I would say. Same thing, I would say, with when you're contemplating like an SOW, leveraging SOW through your program, that's a heavy lift. So if you're contemplating that and direct sourcing, I would say from an ROI and a speed to benefit, direct sourcing would be a better choice. And also thinking back to Meta, just as another example, I think we had to put in place 100 new contracts with staffing suppliers. With a direct sourcing rollout, you just need a curator and a technology provider. And I would highly suggest bringing in a specific curator and then a technology provider. So night and day different, night and day.
What would you say in terms of like average timeline for both? If you were to look at what did it take you guys in terms of months to roll out MSP versus roll out direct sourcing?
Good question. I'm going to say 6 months to a year on MSP VMS. And the long lead time is never the providers in any of these things. It's always your own company. Your own company is always the problem. The opportunity, the challenge. But for direct sourcing, I think you could set that up, in a matter of a couple months to a few months, really do it right. So just much easier lift. And I know, Coop, you've been around forever. You might want to comment on that as well.
He meant that in the best possible way.
Exactly.
I'm just messing around with you.
Yeah, Keith knows that because he's been around forever with me. I think it's all those things you just said, right? It's a lot less gray hair. You're referencing, you're able to implement technology and service from a speed capability that differs from VMS and MSP, but you're also implementing tech and service solutions that integrate with that already existing infrastructure of VMS and MSP, right? So you're able to, even provide more value to those assets by the tech integrating on the DS side or the direct sourcing side to the VMS, the curation integrated into the MSP or self-managed workflow, and it adds value there. And implements a ton quicker. To Keith's point, agreed.
I would say spend your time on establishing meaningful governance, thinking through your KPIs and SLAs, which the providers will have to coach you on more than likely, and then change management. Getting out there and educating your internal buyers, your managers, as to what this thing is. So that they can understand what they're doing when they engage and differentiate between the traditional process and what this new maybe asterisk supplier is within their VMS.
I would just add, I think a lot of times direct sourcing gets overcomplicated because people have been through an MSP and a VMS integration. So when you think about the number of resources that need to be engaged for that period of time, it's much less with direct sourcing. I know Edwin, we've worked together. We had a client that was looking for a 5 to 6 week implementation timeline. They called us one day and said, look, we need this done in a week. And we did it. And now I say that exactly. I think our average time on our side is probably about 6 weeks. Direct sourcing can be implemented as a standalone solution. Typically we don't see a lot of integrations directly with client systems. So that's one of the reasons that we can move very fast. The VMS integrations are a nice to have, but not always necessary. And I say that, so for all our VMS partners that are listening, we want the integration. However, I've worked with Raise, we've worked with AMS where there hasn't been that integration. We've been very successful. Ultimately, we want to be able to do that down the road, but you can set this up very quickly. And that integration can be done in parallel.
No, great conversation again, guys. And let's stay on the topic. I'm getting questions on integration right now. People are saying, what about integrating with an applicant tracking system? Is it necessary? And what are some best practices? And Coop, I heard you say, and you're nodding your head. I'll throw this one your way.
No, it's integrations, it's tech, right? It's geeky. It's kind of fun. So to dive into it and to circle back to a word that was said earlier, automatically, right? We're talking about how do we automatically distribute requisitions, right? And to me, when I hear the word automatically from a technology perspective, I start thinking integrations, right? And to the VMS, how do we integrate these direct sourcing solutions, keep the VMS as the system of record, but automate through API endpoints, the receipt of requisitions, contingent workforce requisitions through the VMS, right? The transmission of submittals back to the VMS via APIs, the events that occur within the VMS, whether it be interview schedulings, rec closing, et cetera, right? You do all that through the VMS naturally through a direct sourcing tech provider. Conversely, you do the exact same thing with the ATS side of the house, and it's using those same integrations that you do with the VMS with an ATS. And to provide some points on there, I love the question because often we do get caught in the contingent workforce discussion and siloed into the VMS discussion. But really, direct sourcing technology complemented with curation service should encapsulate all of the talent you need within your organization, whether it be an FTE or non-FTE, right? Calling a non-FTE anything that contingent, SOW, anything that's not a full-time worker, if you will. So I love the question because what you're doing is utilizing your direct sourcing technology in a hub and spoke framework, right? Where your direct sourcing technology has a plug and play integration hub, right? To the VMS, it's all those things we just talked about and adding value to that existing VMS by plugging directly into it as a source of talent, whether it be directly through the client or otherwise. But on the ATS side, when we start talking about known workers and we start talking about volumes of candidates resident within an ATS, it's determining how do we pull those workers out of the ATS. And what we're looking to do as direct sourcing technology partners is add value to that ATS asset the same way we add value to that VMS asset. And what I mean by that is when if you're a corporate on here, you have an ATS, you may have 5 million, 10 million, 15 million people sitting in your ATS, right? You may not be able to know who a single one of them are, or when they came in, how long they've been there, or what skill they had when they came in there. So a lot of it on the direct sourcing technology side is developing integrations that allow us to bring that data into our direct sourcing tech platform and using AI to interpret what the worker profile is of this worker, one, when they came into your ATS, and then also from a skills progression perspective, where are they today, right? So as an example, if you're using your brand to attract talent and you're attracting talent from where they were 3 years ago from a skill perspective, right? It's a bad candidate experience. They're going to opt out likely of your community. Conversely, if you have someone that came into your ATS 3 years ago as a software tester, they're probably a developer today. So when you're engaging them as a developer, they're like, I didn't remember going to this ATS, but man, it's a dead ringer, from what I'm doing now, and you get a much higher engagement level. So when we talk about ATS, a lot of it is maximizing the value of your ATS, the candidates within it, using AI as opposed to Boolean search to really identify the skill capability of these workers. And then beyond that, looking at integrations directly with your ATS career portal, right? You're going to attract candidates to that. How you integrate your direct sourcing tech with that career portal, then how do you keep the candidate experience continuity, right? To where they're like, whoa, I thought I was at abc.com and all of a sudden I'm completely somewhere else. And it's building those integration and hooks for that candidate experience. And then lastly, just the frequency that you're utilizing those integrations to update net new candidates. So, very, interesting topic. I appreciate the question because I think it's huge because sometimes we get stuck in that contingent VMS conversation.
No, it's a great commentary. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Oh, yeah, no, I wanted to add on, I agree with everything that Coop just said. I think of recruiting, think of the recruiting from the curator side and on the traditional direct sourcing investment, the investment of your curator in finding the talent and seeding the pool. But then you've got the investment of your full-time recruiters, or maybe your RPO, that's also an investment in attracting talent. Why not create one doorway in the front end of the engagement process and capture all of them in your direct sourcing pool that you can then leverage for both your contract or your full-time
Exactly.
roles. So really, you want to build this asset. It's your asset, and all the investment that you're putting into attracting, it should be going into this asset you're building.
Mhm.
I have one other comment to add to that, and I agree with everything that you guys said. We have leveraged past candidate databases or ATSs. Sometimes there are barriers internally to allowing us to integrate to that ATS. So there are ways to still tap into that talent. We can do an invite process where we're inviting them to be part of your talent pool. And what that does is it refreshes your existing database. It leverages the investment you've already made in sourcing those candidates. You know they want to work with you. And then the curation team can then take those candidates that want to be part of the talent pool. They know they're available and ready to go, and they can start segmenting them into the various roles or the various talent pools. So just another option.
That's a good point. So you essentially could use an invite during an implementation, and then later on, subject to permission from HR or talent acquisition, continue to batch over what we'll call silver medalists or known talent. Okay.
Well, and most of the time, the internal ATS that they're using, there's usually language in there that will allow the company or the client to reach out to those candidates regarding jobs. And so there's usually language in there that allows them to do, or allows us to do, the invite process. So we're not giving away any proprietary information or accessing proprietary information. So typically the invite process is, there's not as many legal barriers potentially to do something like that. And we also know that about 40% of people that apply for full-time work are also available for contract roles. So again, when these silos exist within organizations, it's like talent's talent, but it's really hard for them to get to a total talent model. But this allows us a way to be able to tap into that talent for contractor roles.
Great dialogue. And apparently people are thinking on this topic because we have a follow-up question here about VMS integration points. Somebody's saying, well, they believe VMS integration is maybe more detailed or something, and they're asking, are there specific integration points that are considered must-haves for a VMS? That's assuming a VMS is present.
Yeah, I'd actually like to jump in and answer this from the curator perspective, which is probably not what everyone's expecting since I'm not the technology provider, but ultimately what's really important too when you think about these integrations from the curator lens is these integrations impact how efficient and effective our teams can be. And it means that that's a really key component when we're designing the solution. So when we're putting a team together, we're taking all of these things into account. We're taking into account what's the technology stack, what are the capabilities of the talent pool technology, what integrations are in place, what sourcing tools, et cetera. So this piece of it is actually a really big piece, because even if we decide we don't integrate from the beginning, it means that we might need to have additional administrative support up front that can help kind of fill in some of those gaps of the more manual workflow until we get the integration in place. And I will say this sounds counterintuitive, but I think folks that might be sitting there saying, oh, well, maybe our program's not that big, we're only doing a couple hundred hires a year or something like that. I would say that the integration is just as important, whether it's 200 hires, 2,000, 20,000, because it really comes down to, again, how efficient and effective the team can be. So there are a couple kind of standard integration points. And I think Coop, you touched on, a few of these too, as you're talking about some of those other pieces around, once the requisition is approved in the VMS, we want that to automatically go to your curation team so they can see it. We've talked a good bit today about that advanced distribution capability. So that exclusivity period that, your curator would have, you want that to be, automatic. And then if the candidates aren't provided in that time frame, it's sent off automatically to your staffing suppliers, unless it's already been sent out by the curator anyways, as we kind of talked about that previously. Another key integration is even thinking about how the requisition flows, that detail flows from the VMS through the talent pool technology, and then also to job boards, so that all of that's happening automatically in the background and your curator doesn't have to do any, kind of manual stuff around that. The candidate submissions, and also everything around kind of candidate data tracking. So have they completed their interviews, what's the feedback? We talked about that, it being really important too, but all the feedback of those candidate interviews is really important. And it's stuff that we want to be able to look at as curators kind of in the future too, to say, maybe they aren't picked for this particular role, but this could be there could be another good fit for them. Or we would just want to make sure we have all of that data and information kind of ongoing. And then it comes down to the verbal offer and when the candidate accepts it, we want to be able to track all that. So we also know when we need to be kicking off onboarding. So I think all of those are, would be great to have. If there are places that I would say really to prioritize, it's around that approved requisition and the ability to send those out in advance to your creation teams, the job board integration, and then also candidate submittals. And on top of that, I'll say the real-time updates on the requisition status. Yep. So exactly. When you think about efficiency and the speed at which we have to move, if we're getting kind of a batched, review of that at the end of the day, but somebody submitted that requisition in the morning, we've now missed a whole day of working on that. So we want to make sure that everything's really happening, quickly in real time. So I think for folks who are going through this, evaluation process, I think the things you're going to want to really ask I would ask the folks on the phone here from the talent pool technologies, and you can talk to your curators that you're looking at as well, but really just kind of understanding what capability do the talent pool technologies have to integrate with the VMS. And likewise, is your VMS willing to integrate with them? Two-way street, so don't want to leave them out of the conversation. What level of detail, what level of integration can they complete? Because you think about all these different things, every integration is a little bit different. I'm not, the most tech savvy person, so I feel like this is a place I've had to learn a lot, is just kind of what that means in terms of the level of integration. And I would also really call out here if you've done any customization to your VMS. So there could be pre-built integrations between a talent pool technology and the VMS. But if you've customized your own VMS so much, that means that there's going to be some changes that need to happen in terms of how you actually integrate. So doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it's something for you to think about and make sure that you're aware of as you're kind of planning out the process. So words of wisdom and advice on this, I would just say, get real life examples of where these integrations have taken place, how the teams have all worked together to get this, accomplished, what it looks like, get case studies on that. Include your VMS in this discussion, make sure they're willing to dedicate resources, because likely they're going to have to do something, even if there's a pre-built integration or it's a custom build, there's something they're going to have to do. And then I would also really map out the workflow as early on as possible so that we can make sure we've got the right team. And you want to make sure that the technology is going to be set up that it actually supports that workflow. Yeah, so I think those are kind of the big pieces that I could talk on. I feel like I could talk about this for a while, and I just went through that very quickly, but those are kind of the things that I would call out to the group.
And can I add in, I'm sure the tech partners are going to kill Julie and I for looking at this from a curation perspective, but I want to add on, I wholly agree with everything that Julie said. For us, this is one of our key best practices is to be integrated at the points that Julie just went through. It allows us to be as effective as possible. And it also enables that candidate experience to be as good as possible, right? Yeah. They're getting first access, hopefully, to that demand. And the other piece I want to add is it helps your client's asset be that much better. If your integration is deep and consistent, you get that feedback on that candidate, you can go back and understand exactly all of the interactions that they've had with the client, and you're just building that robust asset.
Yeah.
It's something that I didn't hear mentioned. I assume that there's some kind of a billing integration, probably maybe just even a report or an extract for a third party. I suppose if there's a payroll provider, are they extracting time card data or something like that? And that's probably not an integration. I'm just kind of following that up with my own question here. Does anybody want to comment on that?
It's going to default to your system of record, right? I mean, typically in the VMS, right, it's going to be a VMS report that party's procuring.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. You want your end users spending their time in the VMS. And that's something I always protected. So I didn't want to have like third-party FMSs. I always wanted everything plugged into my VMS because I want to channel everyone in my company to go to the VMS to find talent. Okay. And then your talent should be just integrating, or should be just interfacing with the direct sourcing platform.
Okay.
The curated experience.
So we have a ton of questions coming in right now too. So let's try to, and I just doing a time check. We're down to 10 minutes. So let's see if we can burn through a few of these. We have a question about using a talent pool to support a total talent model. Something maybe we've talked about. Does anybody want to comment on that?
I can jump in and
Yeah.
be brief there. Brian, I think this was mentioned a few times, but talent is agile. I think Karen shared the stat that, 40% of candidates seeking full-time opportunities are also interested in contract opportunities. So I think our clients need to be set up to be agile as well. And my recommendation is maybe you can't go forward with the total talent approach on day one, but collect that information, understand, the people entering in your pool, are they open to different engagement models, be it, gig, full-time or contract. And I think important that you are bridging the gap, if one does exist, between HR and procurement to ensure that the next iteration, be it total talent management, you're not having to clear the hurdles for the first time in that discussion. Ultimately, I think it's okay to understand your direct source program is going to evolve. There is a maturity curve, and I think total talent management is on that curve. You just want to make sure that you're having the conversation day one, that there aren't kind of boxes you should be selecting in implementation to make sure you can meet that goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, great job answering quickly there too. Appreciate that. Let's see, we've got a quick one here. Should we manage? So here's one. I don't know how to restate this. Should we manage talent pools for, I guess, what we typically used to call blue collar workers differently than white collar workers? I haven't thought of a better way to say blue collar and white collar. I hate that. But if anybody in the audience out there has a better way of saying that, please take the survey afterward and let us know. But so basically, how do we manage blue collar versus white collar talent pools?
I'll go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah, cool.
So it's not so much that the management of the talent pools needs to be different. However, you need to manage the candidates within those pools differently. So if they're shift workers, think light industrial, retail, call center, maybe help desk, versus those roles that maybe are typically salaried type roles, professional roles, et cetera. I think one of the benefits of direct sourcing is that you have more control over the candidate experience with consistent engagement that is specific to that candidate. I think regardless of the role, for both of those categories, you need to have an easy way to communicate with them. In our view, there needs to be two-way SMS texting, it needs to be mobile enabled. We know from our research that most people want to communicate via text. They want that capability. So I think that's regardless of the type of role. I think when you think about shift workers in those categories that I mentioned, oftentimes you may need to communicate more regularly. They often are shorter term assignments. They may be available for different shifts. So maybe they're available for both swing shift and second shift, or swing shift or third shift. I think when you communicate with them might be important because of those different shifts that they might be looking for. So, you can't just communicate with people that are looking for second and third shift during the morning hours or during the middle of the afternoon. So I think those are some things to think about. And I think too, the application process needs to be short. I think whether you're looking for a light industrial role or an IT role, they don't want to spend a lot of time during the application process. I think typically there's more questions that might need to be asked for shift workers. So in terms of the types of shifts, what days they're available, et cetera. Whereas maybe somebody that's looking for an IT role, they really just want to upload their resume, answer a couple of questions and be done. I think the last point I want to make is that the communication that you have with either type of worker needs to be relevant to that worker. So we talked about kind of these like automatic communications. That's great. We want there to be some automation. However, we don't want to spam those workers to death, and we only want to communicate that with them with information that's relevant to them and the role that they're looking for.
Well, nice job. Quick answer. Appreciate that. See if we can get to another question or two here. We have what are the top or best practices for optimizing our brand so we can promote our job descriptions? What are like the top 2 or 3 things? Edwin.
Pick me. I'm a marketing guy. Marketing is my favorite thing about the recruitment industry, is that you're putting out marketing campaigns, you're actually getting responses back, which is not true of marketing in all industries. Well, this is something that your curation partner should have lots of experience in and be passionate about. We actually wrote a resource that we call the Direct Sourcing Playbook a while back. It's available at raiserecruiting.com, and it's got all of this stuff in there. But I would say what you want to start with is figuring out what's the EVP for your contingent program. What's EVP? Your employer value proposition. What's great about your contingent program? Why should people want to work with you? And then after you figure that out, you want to start building templates for your job ads, your job advertisements. I didn't say job descriptions. There's a big difference. The job description is what the job is. Your job ad is a marketing document that attracts people to come work at your company. And then once you've got that great job advertisement together, we use something called programmatic job advertising technology, which basically sends out your job to all of the sites and maximizes the exposure and the cost of doing that. Gets you the best pricing you can. And then a next key thing that everyone should be doing, and sadly most are not, is just simply listing all of your contingent jobs on your own corporate careers page. There was a study that found that 77% of candidates are visiting your careers page. Yet we did our own little study. We looked at all the Fortune 500 companies. Less than 10% are listing their contingent jobs on your careers page. It's a huge miss. We've already talked about inviting your ATS candidates into your talent pools. That's a big one. And then I would say you also want to regularly promote on social media to your employees, to alumni, retirees. You really want to get out there, put it in your email signature. And then the last thing that I'll mention, it's my favorite part, is you got these specialized or hard to fill roles. You challenge your creation partner to get creative. Go to industry associations, start scraping public candidate databases. We've done job fairs and banners and even TikTok ads. So, get creative and really try to pull as many people as you can into your talent community.
Nice. Great advice. Here's an interesting one. Which customers are executing direct sourcing programs well? So they seem to be asking, what are like the premier programs? We might do an around the horn on this. Who wants to take this?
I'll start. Yeah, just because I feel like I had one. Without naming names, I think what's important and why the high performing direct sourcing programs of these companies are doing well is they have some things in common. And some of the things we've been talking about on this webinar, but one thing that we were doing at Meta in particular, or some things that we were doing in Meta that were very successful was we had dedicated curation. Like dedicated curation was a big deal. It's very important. Corporate web page integration, proactive sourcing and community building, formal KPI measurements, and then what I spoke about earlier, which is a formal governance and oversight for the program to sort of be agile with the program, find where the bumps in the road are, help the program be successful that way. So I'm sure there are many others. Like we can go around the horn, but I think setting it up the right way gives it all the advantages in the world to be successful.
Yeah,
being thoughtful on the front end.
I could add, and don't want to, can't share any client specific names, but I think just to add on to what Keith said is one thing that I notice as a theme through our most successful programs is strong stakeholder engagement. So whoever is leading the program, they need to be your champion, and you can get technology partners and curators that can guide you internally to make sure the right people are involved from day one. They need to understand, I think Edwin said this earlier, what a partnership really means. And so making sure you've got that internally is a consistent theme, and I think the most successful programs.
Yeah, I would add on to that too of what Laura said, that I think there has to be a level of commitment and dedication to the direct sourcing program. I know that we heard some today on if folks push back on exclusivity periods and stuff like that, but I think you've got to have that dedicated and committed focus to making direct sourcing a success and have that from the client, because otherwise, if you're not putting anything into it, you're not going to get anything out of it. And so the clients that we see really get to that point where they're mature and building really quickly is that they're investing and making this the priority channel over others.
And I think I would add, it's really the commitment to kind of those best practices. So you've heard us talk a lot about what those things are. And it's important for the client to understand what the impact is when they don't agree to a best practice. So what is the impact to the program? Do we need to reset KPIs and expectations if you can't agree to 3 of the 5 best practices, for example? So that commitment is really important. And I think having the client understand what outcomes they're trying to achieve as well is going to be critical.
And guys, we do have a few more questions. I don't think we're going to get to them, but let's table them for our next webinar, which will probably be in February of next year. And let's take a quick peek. I don't know if hopefully I'm not blanking out Keith and Edwin on everybody's screen here, but if we look at the survey results, it looks like 37% of the folks who responded will be rolling out direct sourcing within 1 year. So again, I think that speaks to the sort of trending of direct sourcing in the industry right now. So that's very encouraging. We asked biggest obstacles right now. So it looks like the biggest obstacle is lack of knowledge, followed by lack of time and potentially lack of resources. We could say they're almost the same thing. So that's interesting to note as well. And then finally, in terms of what people want to hear about in the future, it looks like the most popular response was some customer success stories, as well as more operational best practices. So I would say, I think we had a great dialogue today, in this, being our 7th quarterly webinar. It sticks in my mind as a standout. I want to thank you guys all for your time and for your involvement, and thanks to the audience as well. We look forward to seeing you in 2023. Please take a minute to fill out the survey, which you'll get automatically when you exit the webinar. So again, thanks everybody. Have a great fall, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.